AI is transforming economic opportunities in Silicon Valley, and the high-tech hub is increasingly intertwined with China's AI development. Sean Randolph is Senior Director of the Bay Area Council Economic Institute, which analyzes how economic policy issues affect the region and the state. Let me ask about the San Francisco Bay Area and China's Bay Area, and the
Right.
relationship there. How would you describe it?
I think it's very promising. We're a big economic region here. China Greater Bay Area is also a really big economic region. Our organization, the Bay Area Council, has had a dialogue with the China Greater Bay Area, with governmental entities, think tanks, businesses, going back to when the idea in China was first launched. And so there's a natural synergy, a natural basis for conversation and exchange between the San Francisco Bay Area and the China Greater Bay Area because we have similar assets. Uh, we here are probably the world's #1 technology and innovation and entrepreneurial center. You have really strong technology in Shenzhen. You have more and more science. Uh, Shenzhen is, of course, a national magnet for entrepreneurs in China. Um, there is a huge market in the Greater Bay Area. We have a lot of historical ties with Hong Kong that can play a pretty important intermediary role for our companies that are engaging in the Greater Bay Area. So, in the background, there's all kinds of issues. The national conversation between the U.S. government and the Chinese government make it complicated about what you can do realistically. There's some things that are just harder to do than they were 5 or 10 years ago. But nevertheless, the connections are very much there. And I think it's a natural conversation between our Bay Area and China's. The big difference is actually that aside from China's being much bigger geographically, much bigger population, I think we're more intensely focused on the technology and innovation side. But China's does a lot more manufacturing. We don't do a whole lot of manufacturing here anymore in the Bay Area, San Francisco. We do a lot of prototyping, a lot of early stage stuff, but at scale, supplier networks, that's much more in China. So I think we're going to have, one way or the other, a long-term relationship uh, when it comes to supply chain, supplier networks, and just how the China fits into our global patterns here.
One of the guests I spoke to said that in China there are hundreds of Mark Zuckerbergs. They're just everywhere, with all these young entrepreneurs, and I've met some of them, and I tended to agree with her. These guys, they're forward thinking. They're bouncing all these ideas off of each other, and that's kind of what the Silicon Valley's been too.
Very much, yeah.
Manufacturing that. You talk about not manufacturing, that's been manufactured. Which gets to the whole idea of collaboration, but then competition and complexities. Can you talk about how do you differentiate between all the different C's?
It's really complicated, and it's more complicated than it was in the past. We used to, the Bay Area Council, be very active when we opened our first China offices more than 15 years ago, helping companies from here go into China, get their feet on the ground in the China market. It's a more complicated story now. So we've shifted. We do that. We actually set up a California pavilion every year in Shanghai at the CAIE, the big Shanghai International Import Expo. So we're very committed to that and keeping those channels open. We are still introducing companies from here into China and into the China market. I think we see a real opportunity at the entrepreneurial level. This is the biggest pool of entrepreneurs in the world here in the Bay Area. And we're very familiar with the entrepreneurial environment in China, and there's just a lot of aggressiveness and hard work and creative people. And so there's a lot of respect for what's coming out of China that gets reflected in a lot of technologies, reflected in AI in China, reflected in robotics, reflected in batteries. So I think it's important for us to stay close to and engage with China on these emerging leading edge technologies, on innovation in some of these key fields, because between us and China, that's going to probably set the tune for the rest of the world. And where that opens up opportunities where we're able to collaborate, develop markets together, it's something we want to do. And it's difficult in some fields. There are barriers in semiconductors and barriers in AI, but things around renewable energy, things around climate where we have shared interests, certainly things around health. What about cancer? Cancer rates are rising in China as populations get older. Uh, Industrial pollution, all of those things. We have high cancer rates here. You could talk about Alzheimer's. You could talk about a lot of health-related products and therapies where we should be able to develop these together, and manage those relationships effectively. So, despite the fact that there are more obstacles on the field than there used to be, I think there's still a lot of relatively open doors we need to push on.
You mentioned AI. What about AI regulations? There's been so much discussion about that, and it doesn't seem like anybody's kind of landing one way or the other, and it seems like it's the wild, wild west, and everybody has a different idea. I mean, what are you hearing out there about that, and what are your thoughts?
It's a really good question because you have all these issues and potentialities around the investment in AI and about deployment, large language models, small language models, applications, the hardware, the whole thing. 75% of all the investment in the United States going into AI is going into AI companies in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, primarily San Francisco. More than half of the leading generative AI companies in the world are located here around San Francisco. You could walk to them in 25 or 30 minutes. I think there's a recognition that we need guardrails of some kind. We need reference points of some kind that this can be deployed safely, and not be misused. At the same time, philosophically, we don't in California want to get in the way of innovation. We don't want to start by crafting huge regulatory frameworks that inhibit the ability of companies here to grow as quickly as they possibly can because it's driving so much of the economy now.
Let me ask one final question, which gets to what you were just talking about, different perspectives, Europe and here. Um, I often see the description of U.S.-China relations as this race to the future, and they're kind of neck and neck. But listening to you talking about cancer, why can't it be a race together to solve the problems?
Yeah.
And so that gets back to collaboration, and this whole kind of collaboration competition. What needs to take place? I mean, what would you like to see happen to create more collaboration between the United States and China? And is it possible, or is there always going to be this tension, you think?
Well, I hope there's not always this tension. We know there are issues. We know there are barriers, no question, but let's not stop there. Let's look for where the opportunities are to proceed together. And so we could have a conversation around what are the appropriate guidelines, guardrails for AI? Don't have to be doing AI research together. Internationally, what are the right kind of guardrails we should all be looking for? We see climate as being an area for cooperation for sure. I think I mentioned health. All kinds of issues around health and medicine we could be addressing. And another one broadly is science, that there is a U.S.-China science agreement that was renewed about a year ago at the end of the Biden administration. It needs to be implemented. I think there's an opportunity to enact, to implement, to move forward the science agreement we have in place to do some new things that help all of our citizens and maybe citizens around the world. And then finally, it's not a popular thing with our government in DC now, but I think we've all benefited from having students going back and forth. There are so many fewer American students in China than there used to be. We ought to have a lot more students there. And even though, entry is more difficult than it once was, I think we should be setting a goal, whatever the guidelines are, with having as many Chinese students here as possible, because there's a legacy that comes from living with each other and getting to know each other.
People to people exchanges.
People to people, you bet.
Thank you so much.
Happy to, of course.
For more episodes, go to cgtnnow.com.
That's this edition of Full Frame. Our thanks to our guests for their perspectives on China-U.S. relations. If you know other visionaries you'd like to see on our show, email us at fullframe@cgtnamerica.com. And from all of us here on Full Frame, thanks so much for watching.
The world's currencies are more connected than ever before. The mechanisms that drive the economy are universal. Money moves markets. We explain these trends and show you how the cash in your pocket can have a wide-reaching effect. Because money makes the world go round. Global business.
You've traveled to places where others couldn't be, seen things others couldn't imagine, and heard stories you can't be sure whether to believe. They say that you're privileged, that people look up to you, but only you know how much effort you've made. You're on the ultimate journey to discover a country with 5,000 years of history and nearly 1.5 billion people. Is it a green countryside or a vast sea of neon lights and skyscrapers? Is it a dangerous land choked with smog or the blue sky of a summer's day? What is this China for you? And what is this China for the rest of the world? CGTN. See the difference.
There is no more they, or you, or me. In today's economic landscape, there is only we. An interconnected world of business, trade, and investment. Daily coverage told simply, with insight and new perspectives. Global business. We've got the world covered.
Whether it's about your education, the home you live in, or the items you buy, your money has a story to tell. Because every business story is a human story. Global business.